It's a blazing hot morning in ancient Egypt. A worker spends hours dragging giant blocks of stone across the sand for the pyramids. And at the end of the day, for all that backbreaking work, he gets paid. Not in coins, not in gold, in beer, jugs of it. And he was thrilled. This wasn't a treat. It wasn't happy hour. This was his paycheck. The men who built the pyramids, some of the most amazing things ever made, got a daily ration of bread and beer. That was the deal. Show up, move the stone, go home with your beer. And Egypt wasn't alone. Over in Mesopotamia, the land between two great rivers, it was the same story. Workers, farmers, priests, everyone was drinking beer every single day. So here's the big question. Why? Now you've probably heard the answer already. You might have even been taught it in school. The water was dirty. It would make you sick. So they drank beer instead, because beer was safe. It sounds perfect, it makes total sense, and it's mostly a myth. Here's the thing everyone leaves out. Ancient people drank water all the time. The Egyptians lived right next to the Nile, a giant river running through the middle of their whole world. They drank from it. They washed in it. They fished in it. Water wasn't some rare, deadly thing they were scared of. It was everywhere. So if they had plenty of water, why were they so obsessed with beer? The real answer is way more interesting, and it's not just one reason. It's four. Reason number one, beer wasn't really a drink, it was food. Ancient beer was nothing like the beer today. It was thick, cloudy, almost like a bubbly, soupy bread. And that's basically what it was. They made it from bread and grain, mashed up and left to ferment. That meant it was packed with calories, full of nutrients, vitamins, energy, the exact fuel you need to haul stone across a desert all day. They didn't call it liquid bread for nothing. One jug could keep a worker going the way a full meal would. So when you paid someone in beer, you weren't paying them in booze. You were paying them in lunch, which leads to reason number two. Beer was money. Before coins existed, people still needed a way to trade, to pay wages, to keep track of who owed what. And in Mesopotamia, beer became one of the earliest forms of payment on Earth. Some of the oldest writing ever found, little marks pressed into clay thousands of years ago, isn't poetry. It isn't a love letter. It's receipts, records of workers getting their beer rations. Humans invented writing partly to keep track of who got their beer. Let that sink in. One of the very first things we ever bothered to write down was the beer budget. Reason number three. And this is where the myth has a tiny piece of truth in it. Beer was safe, just not for the reason people think. To make beer, you have to boil the water first. And fermentation, the process that turns grain into alcohol, kills off a lot of the nasty stuff that makes you sick. So beer was often cleaner than water from a dirty pool. But here's the twist. Ancient people had no idea why. They didn't know about germs. Nobody was thinking, I'll drink beer so I don't get an infection. They just noticed beer didn't make them sick as often. They liked how it tasted and it filled their bellies. The safety was a happy accident, a bonus, not the plan. And reason number four might be the most human of all. Beer wasn't just food or money. It was life. It was the center of everything. In Mesopotamia, they didn't just drink beer, they worshipped it. They had a goddess of beer named Ninkasi. And one of the oldest songs we've ever found is a prayer to her that also describes how to brew the beer, which is why many call it the oldest beer recipe ever found. They loved beer so much they turned it into a song so nobody would ever forget. They drank it through straws, long reeds, to sip past the floating bits of grain on top. Rich and poor, young and old, everyone drank it. It was at every festival, every celebration, every funeral. Beer was how you bonded, how you celebrated, how you said goodbye. It wasn't a guilty pleasure, it was the glue holding the whole society together. And that brings us to the strangest idea of all. Some scientists think beer didn't just come along after civilization. They think beer might have helped create it. Here's the theory. Long ago, humans were wanderers, hunting, gathering, always on the move. Then at some point they settled down and started farming grain. And we always assumed they did it to make bread. But some researchers now ask a wild question. What if it wasn't bread? What if one of the reasons humans first planted grain and stayed in one place and built villages and kicked off the entire story of civilization was so they could make beer? Think about that. The pyramids, writing, cities. Maybe part of the reason any of it exists is that our ancestors really, really wanted a drink. So no, ancient people didn't drink beer because the water would kill them. That was never really the reason. They drank it because it fed them, because it paid them, because it brought them together at the end of a long, brutal day. That worker in Egypt, dragging stone under the burning sun, getting handed his jug of beer? He wasn't drinking to survive dirty water. He was drinking because after a day like that, a cold, thick, bready beer with the people you'd worked beside all day was one of the best things life had to offer. And honestly, thousands of years later, that hasn't changed one bit.